The silence in the grand hall of the Blackwood Pack estate wasn't just empty. It was a physical weight, a suffocating, sharp pressure that felt like it was cutting into skin. One moment Claraara Halloway was looking into the eyes of the man the fates had designed specifically for her soul, and the world was full of vibrant color. The next she was on her knees, the echo of his laughter rippling through the crowd like a series of physical blows. The guests, the elite of the werewolf world, thought they were witnessing the end of her life. They saw a rejection so brutal it would break her spirit forever. But they didn't know who was watching from the shadows of the mezzanine. They didn't know that the girl who spent her days scrubbing their floors and polishing their silverware held a secret that would make the Alpha of the Blackwood Pack drop to his knees in genuine terror before the night was over. The annual Mating Moon Gala was more than just a party. It was a high-stakes political chessboard disguised as a celebration of destiny. The air inside the sprawling ballroom smelled of expensive cologne, fresh pine from the surrounding forests, and the underlying metallic scent of nervous adrenaline. Waiters in white tuxedos moved like ghosts through the crowd, offering flutes of champagne to men who could shift into massive wolves and women who wore diamonds worth more than the town's entire GDP. Claraara Halloway adjusted the strap of her stained apron, shrinking back into the darkest shadows of the service corridor. She wasn't a guest. She was never a guest. At 22, Claraara was the pack's unranked, a designation lower than even the lowliest Omega. She was the orphan taken in out of reluctant obligation by the former Alpha, only to be relegated to the kitchens the moment he passed away. Her hands were permanently red from scrubbing industrial pots, and her hair, a chaotic tumble of chestnut curls, was pulled back in a severe, fraying knot. "Stop staring, Halloway!" a sharp voice hissed nearby. Claraara flinched, turning to see Brenda, the head of housekeeping. Brenda was a woman made of sharp angles and accumulated bitterness. "If Alpha Dominic catches you ogling the guests instead of working, you'll be sleeping in the stables tonight with the horses." "I wasn't ogling," Claraara whispered, her voice barely audible over the orchestra, clutching the tray of hors d'oeuvres tighter. "I was just waiting for the crowd to thin, so I could refill the table." "Just do your job and stay invisible," Brenda snapped before moving away. Staying invisible was Claraara's superpower. It was how she had survived for years in a house that hated her presence. But tonight, staying invisible felt entirely impossible. Since sunrise, a low, thrumming heat had been building beneath her skin, a restless energy that made her wolf pace in the back of her mind with a frantic intensity she'd never felt before. She felt pulled, a magnetic tug on her soul, and she knew exactly who was pulling her. Dominic Sterling, the newly appointed Alpha of Blackwood. He stood near the orchestra pit, a glass of amber whiskey in one hand, looking every bit the predator he was. Dominic was 6'4" of corded muscle and pure arrogance, with hair the color of midnight and eyes that usually looked at Claraara as if she were a stubborn stain on his expensive carpet. But tonight, every time he shifted his stance, Claraara felt a jolt of electricity zip up her spine. It was the mate bond. She knew it with a terrifying absolute certainty. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. The fates had paired the pack's lowest servant with its highest ruler. She knew how this story went in human fairy tales, but Blackwood was no fairy tale. Dominic was ambitious, ruthless, and currently engaged in a strategic courtship with Tiffany Rauschut, the daughter of a neighboring Alpha whose land possessed rich oil reserves. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, cutting through the chatter. "Please clear the floor for Alpha Dominic Sterling and his guest of honor." The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Dominic stepped forward, a smug smirk playing on his lips. Tiffany hung on his arm, draped in red silk that cost more than Claraara would earn in a lifetime of service. As they walked past the service corridor, the wind shifted. The scent hit Dominic hard. It was unmistakable. Vanilla, rain, and wild honeysuckle. He stopped dead. His body went rigid. Tiffany tugged at his arm, confused. "Dom, what is it?" Dominic didn't answer her. He turned, his nostrils flaring, his predatory gaze sweeping the room until it locked onto the shadows where Claraara stood. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. He knows, she thought. He feels it, too. For a second, just a split second, she saw genuine shock in his eyes. Then it was replaced by something colder, something like profound disgust. He let go of Tiffany and stalked towards the service corridor. The crowd fell silent, sensing the dramatic shift in the atmosphere. The music died down to a low hum. Claraara wanted to run, but her feet were like lead. She stood frozen as the most powerful man in the territory stopped, mere inches from her. The smell of him, cedar and an approaching storm, was intoxicating, overwhelming her senses. Her wolf whined, desperate to submit, to comfort, and to claim. "Claraara," Dominic said, his voice loud enough to carry to the very center of the room. "Alpha," she breathed, dipping her head in a gesture of respect she had practiced 1,000 times. He laughed, a dry, humorous sound that lacked any warmth. "Do you feel that, Claraara?" "That pull?" She looked up, hope blooming in her chest despite her better judgment. "Yes, Alpha." "It's pathetic," he spat. The hope withered instantly. Dominic turned to the crowd, gesturing at her like she was a prop in a comedy sketch. "Look at this." The moon goddess must have a truly twisted sense of humor. "She thinks this," he waved a hand dismissively at her stained apron and worn shoes, "is fit to stand beside me as a Luna." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the room. Tiffany covered her mouth, her eyes dancing with malicious glee. "I, Dominic Sterling, Alpha of the Blackwood Pack," he announced, his voice booming with the command of the alpha tone that forced everyone to listen. "Reject you, Claraara Halloway." The word struck her physically. It felt like a rib had snapped clean in half. Claraara gasped, clutching her chest as the bond, that beautiful golden thread connecting their souls, shattered into jagged glass. "I reject you as my mate," he continued, leaning in close so only she could see the cruelty in his eyes. "You are nothing. You are a servant, and you will never be anything else." He turned his back on her without another word. "Get her out of my sight. She's ruining the mood of the celebration." 2 security guards stepped forward, grabbing Claraara by the arms. She didn't fight. She couldn't. The pain of the rejection was a white-hot fire consuming her veins. Tears blurred her vision as she was dragged towards the rear exit, the sound of the orchestra starting up again, drowning out the sound of her breaking heart. But just as the guards pushed the heavy oak doors open to throw her into the rainy night, a sound cut through the noise of the party. It wasn't a growl. It wasn't a shout. It was the deep, rhythmic thumping of a heavy helicopter rotor, and it was landing right on the front lawn. The guards hesitated. "What is that?" one grunted, loosening his grip on Claraara's arm. The wind from the rotors shook the window panes of the grand hall. The guests, curious and alarmed, drifted towards the main entrance. Dominic looked annoyed. This was his night, his moment to solidify his alliance, and someone dared interrupt. "Keep her here," Dominic ordered the guards, pointing at Claraara. "I want her to see this. I want her to see the kind of world she doesn't belong to." He marched to the main double doors and threw them open. A sleek, military-grade helicopter painted matte black, with no markings other than a silver crest on the tail touched down on the manicured grass. The sheer force of the wind ruined Tiffany's hair, sending her shrieking behind Dominic for cover. The engine cut. The silence that followed was heavy with a silent threat. A side door slid open. First, 4 men exited. They weren't pack warriors. They were something else entirely. They wore bespoke Italian suits that fit over bulky Kevlar vests, and they moved with the synchronized precision of elite special forces. They scanned the perimeter, their eyes hidden behind dark tactical glasses despite the night. Then a fifth man stepped out. He was older, perhaps in his 50s, with silver fox hair and a beard trimmed to perfection. He wore a charcoal trench coat over a 3-piece suit. He didn't look like a werewolf. He looked like a king of industry, a man who bought and sold countries for sport. "Who are you?" Dominic shouted, stepping onto the porch, his chest puffed out in a display of dominance. "You are trespassing on Blackwood territory." The older man ignored him completely. He walked up the steps, his polished Oxfords clicking on the stone with a steady rhythm. He stopped 10 feet from Dominic, looking at the Alpha with an expression of mild boredom. "I am looking for someone," the man said. His voice was calm, but it carried an undercurrent of power that made the hair on the back of Dominic's neck stand up. This wasn't Alpha power. It was ancient, deep-rooted power. "You don't just land on my lawn," Dominic snarled, his claws extending. "State your business or leave." The stranger finally looked at Dominic. "You must be the boy who runs this establishment." "Dominic, isn't it?" "I am Alpha Dominic." "Right, Alpha," the stranger chuckled darkly. "I am here for the heir." Whispers broke out among the guests. Heir? What heir? Dominic had no children. "I don't know what you're talking about," Dominic snapped. "I am the only heir here." The stranger checked a gold pocket watch. "Unlikely. My tracking spell led me specifically to this hall. She is here." Tiffany piped up, stepping forward with a forced smile. "Are you looking for me? My father is Alpha Rauschut. I am the highest-ranking female here." The stranger glanced at Tiffany, then dismissed her with a wave of his hand. "No, not you. Too shallow." He pushed past Dominic, entering the grand hall with an air of ownership. The security guards made a move to stop him, but the 4 suited men behind the stranger moved faster than the eye could follow. In a blur of motion, Dominic's guards were on the floor, groaning. Their arms twisted at unnatural angles. Dominic froze. These men were Lycan enforcers. He recognized the speed now. The stranger stood in the center of the ballroom, scanning the crowd. He sniffed the air, frowning. Then his head snapped toward the rear of the hall, toward the service corridor where Claraara was still being held by the 2 guards. His eyes widened. He began to walk. The crowd parted instantly, terrified. Claraara, still reeling from the rejection pain, looked up through her tear-filled lashes. She saw the man approaching. She didn't know him, yet something about him felt familiar, like a song she had heard in the womb. The stranger stopped 3 feet from her. He looked at her stained apron, her worn shoes, and the red marks on her arms where the guards had grabbed her. His face, previously composed and cold, crumbled into an expression of pure heartbreak. "My God," he whispered. "Clara?" Claraara trembled. "Yes?" The stranger turned slowly to face the room. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop 20 degrees. The boredom was gone from his eyes, replaced by a rage so profound it made the air vibrate. "Who?" he asked, his voice low and deadly. "Who dared to put a servant's uniform on the Grand Duchess of the Valerius bloodline?" Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. Dominic laughed nervously, walking up behind him. "Grand Duchess? What are you talking about? That's Claraara. She's a stray, a charity case. Her parents were nobodies who died in a car crash." The stranger turned to Dominic. The look on his face made Dominic take a step back. "Her parents," the stranger said, enunciating every word, "were King Alexander Valerius and Queen Genevieve. They didn't die in a car crash. They were assassinated during the coup of '05. I hid Claraara myself to keep her safe until her powers manifested. I am her uncle, Lord Sebastian Valerius." Dominic's face went pale. The name Valerius wasn't just a name. It was the royal family of the Lycan Council. They were the rulers of all wolf kind. "That's impossible," Dominic stammered. "She's an Omega. She has no scent. She's weak. She has no scent because I cloaked it, Sebastian snarled. And she is not weak. She is a true alpha. And you? Sebastian looked at the marks on Claraara's arm again. You have mistreated her. Sebastian turned back to Claraara. He didn't bow like a normal person. He dropped to one knee, lowering his head all the way to the dirty floor of the service corridor. Your Highness, Sebastian said, his voice thick with emotion. I have searched for you for 18 years. I am so sorry I was late. Following his lead, the 4 terrifying enforcers also dropped to their knees. Claraara stood there, the rejected servant girl, looking down at one of the most powerful men in the world kneeling at her feet. Dominic watched, his mouth open. The realization hit him like a freight train. He had just rejected the future queen of the Lycans, and by Lycan law, rejecting a royal mate was treason punishable by death. The ballroom was a tableau of shock. No one moved. No one breathed. The only sound was the soft weeping of Claraara Halloway. Stand up, Claraara whispered, her voice trembling. Please, I don't understand. Sebastian rose slowly. He took off his charcoal trench coat and draped it gently over her shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled of expensive tobacco and safety. There is much to explain, Claraara. But first, we must leave this place. It is not fit for you. He glared at the room, his gaze lingering on the guests who had laughed at her moments ago. They all looked at the floor, terrified to meet his eyes. Wait, Dominic interrupted. The panic was setting in now. He needed to salvage this. If she left, he was dead. If she left, his pack would be sanctioned into oblivion. Dominic stepped forward, forcing a charming smile onto his face, though it looked brittle. Lord Sebastian, surely there has been a misunderstanding. We have cared for Claraara for years. She is family to us. Family? Claraara spoke up. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a new weight. She looked at Dominic, her eyes dry now. The rejection had severed the bond, but it had also severed her fear. You made me sleep in the laundry room when it snowed, Dominic. You let your beta beat me when the soup was cold. And 10 minutes ago, you called me nothing. Dominic flinched. Claraara, baby, I was under pressure. The politics, you know how it is. It was a test to see if you were ready for the harsh realities of leadership. A test? Sebastian repeated. He stepped closer to Dominic. You rejected her publicly. I heard the echoes of the bond breaking when I landed. You shattered a royal mate bond. Sebastian reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone. He tapped a single button. Initiate Protocol 0, he said into the device. The Blackwood Pack is now under martial law. Freeze all their assets, ground their flights, and bring the tribunal executioner. Dominic's knees buckled. No, you can't do that. I can do whatever I want, Sebastian said calmly. I am the regent until she takes the throne. Clara! Dominic turned to her, desperation clawing at his throat. He dropped to his knees, not in reverence, but in terror. Clara, please tell him. We were friends once. Remember when we were kids, before my father died? Please don't let him kill me. Claraara looked down at the man she had loved since she was a child, the man who had just humiliated her for a girl in a red dress. She felt a strange sensation in her chest. The pain of the broken bond was fading, replaced by a burning heat. It was her wolf. For years, her wolf had been dormant, suppressed by the cloaking spell Sebastian had mentioned. But the trauma of the rejection, combined with the presence of her blood relative, had shattered the seal. Claraara's eyes flashed. They didn't turn the usual golden yellow of a regular wolf. They turned a brilliant, glowing violet. The pressure in the room skyrocketed. Windows cracked. The champagne glasses on the trays shattered in unison. Dominic covered his head, whining like a pup. The sheer aura emanating from Claraara was crushing him into the floorboards. I will not let him kill you, Dominic, Claraara said, her voice sounding layered, as if two people were speaking at once. Dominic looked up, hope sparking in his eyes. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Claraara. I won't let him kill you, she finished, because you are not worth the stain on his blade. She turned to Sebastian. Take me away from here. Sebastian smiled, a genuine proud smile. As you wish, Your Majesty. He guided her towards the door. As they walked past the kneeling, trembling form of Dominic Sterling, Claraara didn't even look down. She stepped over his hand as if he were a piece of furniture. But as she reached the doors, Tiffany Rochute, foolish and fueled by jealousy, made a fatal mistake. You're just a maid, Tiffany shrieked, grabbing a steak knife from a nearby table and lunging at Claraara's back. You can't be a queen! It happened in slow motion. Sebastian turned, reaching for his weapon, but he wasn't fast enough. Claraara was. Without even turning around, Claraara threw her hand backward. A wave of violet energy, pure kinetic force, blasted from her palm. It hit Tiffany squarely in the chest, lifting her off her feet and pinning her against the far wall 5 feet off the ground. Tiffany gasped, struggling against the invisible hand holding her there. Claraara turned slowly. Her eyes were blazing violet fire. She looked at her hand, surprised, then at Tiffany. I am not a maid, Claraara stated. And if you ever try to touch me again, I will erase your entire bloodline from history. She dropped her hand. Tiffany fell to the floor, unconscious. Claraara walked out into the night, the rain parting around her as if afraid to touch her skin. She boarded the black helicopter, leaving the Blackwood Pack in ruins behind her. The ride was a blur of silence and oppressive luxury. Claraara sat buckled into creamy leather seats, the vibrations of the rotors humming through her exhausted body. She still wore the stained apron, a grotesque contrast to the polished mahogany interior of the aircraft. Sebastian sat across from her, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He didn't speak for the first hour as they flew over glittering cityscapes that eventually gave way to the imposing, snow-capped peaks of the Swiss Alps. It hurts, doesn't it? Sebastian said finally, his voice cutting through the drone of the engine. Claraara looked down at her chest. The physical ache where the mate bond had snapped was dulling into a cold, hollow void. But beneath it, something else was waking up. It felt like molten lead bubbling in her marrow. I feel like I'm burning from the inside out, she whispered, her throat raw. That is the suppression seal breaking, Sebastian explained, his tone clinical yet gentle. For 18 years I had to bind your wolf, Claraara. If I hadn't, your scent would have alerted the Iron Wolves, the traitor faction that murdered your parents, within days. To keep you hidden, I had to make you ordinary. I had to make you weak. A tear leaked from Claraara's eye. You made me suffer. You left me in that house with those people who treated me like dirt. Sebastian looked away, a flicker of deep pain crossing his features. It was the hardest thing I have ever had to do. To ensure the seal held, you couldn't experience intense joy, pride, or deep belonging. Those emotions would have triggered your true alpha essence and broken the cloak. Your misery, Claraara, was your camouflage. It was necessary for your survival. The cruelty of it robbed her of breath. Her entire life of neglect hadn't been bad luck. It had been a strategic calculation by the man sitting across from her. I hate you for that, she said, her voice flat. I know, Sebastian replied softly. And when you sit on the throne, you may execute me for it. But you are alive. The Valerius bloodline survives. The helicopter crested a jagged peak, revealing a valley hidden from the rest of the world. Nestled inside was the citadel, a sprawling fortress of ancient gray stone and modern glass architecture that looked impenetrable. It was beautiful, cold, and terrifying. When they landed on the private pad, an army of attendants was waiting. They didn't look like the staff at Blackwood, These people moved with lethal grace. Even the maids smelled like apex predators. They bowed so low their foreheads touched the frosty tarmac as Claraara stepped out. She was whisked away into a world of overwhelming opulence. The stained apron was peeled from her body and burned. She was bathed in oils that smelled of jasmine and rare minerals, scrubbed until her skin was raw, and dressed in silk robes the color of amethyst. But the luxury couldn't stop the pain. By nightfall, Claraara was thrashing on a bed large enough to sleep 6 people. Her body temperature had spiked so high, the air in the room shimmered. "It's happening too fast," Sebastian noted, pacing the perimeter of her chamber. 4 lichen healers were trying to hold her down, their faces grim. "The rejection catalyzed the shift," one healer grunted as Claraara kicked out, sending him flying into a stone pillar. "Her wolf is furious at the insult. It wants out now." Claraara screamed, a sound that wasn't entirely human. Her bones began to audibly crack. It was an agony beyond anything she had experienced in the Blackwood kitchens. Her spine elongated, snapping into a new configuration. Her jaw dislocated, reshaping into a muzzle. The violet light returned, pulsing from her skin in waves so powerful it shattered the reinforced glass windows of the bedroom. The healers were thrown back against the walls, unable to approach the raw kinetic energy emanating from her. "Everyone out!" Sebastian roared, shielding his eyes. "She's a kinetic alpha! She can't control it!" The room emptied, leaving only Sebastian. Claraara was no longer on the bed. In the center of the room stood a wolf. She was massive, easily twice the size of Dominic's wolf form. Her fur was not just white. It was pearlescent, shimmering like fresh snow under moonlight. But it was her eyes that held the true power. They glowed with that same intense violet light, crackling with untamed energy. The wolf looked at Sebastian. It didn't recognize him. It only knew rage, pain, and the need to destroy something because of the rejection it had suffered. The great white wolf snarled, the sound shaking the foundations of the citadel. She crouched, ready to spring at the only target in the room. Sebastian didn't shift. He didn't raise his hands in defense. He knew that if he fought her now, her instinct would be to kill him, and she would live with that guilt forever. Instead, the regent of the lichen world, the man feared by prime ministers and alphas alike, dropped to his knees and bared his neck. "I submit to the blood," he said, using the ancient high lichen tongue. "Strike me down if you must, my queen. But know that you are safe. You are home." The giant wolf froze in midair just as it was about to pounce. The violet eyes narrowed, processing the scent of submission, the scent of family. Slowly, the growling ceased. The wolf lowered its massive head, sniffing Sebastian's exposed throat. The violet glow in its eyes dimmed slightly, replaced by a flicker of confused intelligence. Claraara had arrived, and she was terrifying. Meanwhile, Blackwood Hall was under occupation. The festive decorations from the Mating Moon Gala were still up, casting surreal, cheerful shadows over a house gripped by terror. Dominic Sterling sat in his office, nursing a bottle of scotch that cost more than Claraara used to make in a year. The curtains were drawn. Outside he could hear the heavy, synchronized boots of the lichen enforcers patrolling his grounds. They had locked down the territory within an hour of Sebastian's call. No one in, no one out. Dominic was no longer the Alpha. He was a prisoner in his own kingdom. The door opened without a knock. Marcus, his beta and best friend since childhood, walked in. Marcus didn't bow. He didn't even nod. He looked at Dominic with undisguised contempt. "The council just froze our bank accounts," Marcus said, throwing a tablet onto the desk. "We can't pay the staff. We can't buy inventory for the lumber mills. We're hemorrhaging money, Dom." "It's temporary," Dominic slurred, waving a hand dismissively. "Just until this misunderstanding blows over." "Misunderstanding?" Marcus laughed bitterly. You rejected the Lycan Queen on a live stream that half the pack recorded on their phones. We are ruined. The pack is talking about invoking the right of challenge to remove you before the tribunal gets here to execute us all. Dominic slammed his glass down, shattering it. They wouldn't dare. They are terrified. You chose a spoiled brat with an oil allowance over a true alpha. You endangered every pup in this pack because you wanted to play politics. Marcus leaned over the desk, his eyes flashing amber. Fix this, Dominic, or I'll kill you myself to save my family. Marcus stormed out, leaving Dominic alone in the silence of his failure. The alcohol was doing nothing to numb the icy claw of panic gripping his gut. He had to get Claraara back. Not because he loved her, he still couldn't reconcile the servant girl with the queen, but because she was his only shield against Sebastian's wrath. If he could convince her that he regretted the rejection, that he wanted a second chance, maybe she would call off the executioners. But how? He couldn't get near her. He needed leverage, something that proved he knew the real Claraara, not just the royalty. His alcohol-addled brain clawed through memories of the past 10 years. Claraara scrubbing floors. Claraara taking out the trash. Claraara. He sat up straight. He remembered something. 7 years ago, he had been 15, drunk on his first taste of alpha power after his father got sick. He had gone up to the attic room where Claraara slept to torment her, to remind her of her place. He had found her kneeling on the floor, prying up a loose floorboard. When she saw him, she had panicked, shoving something deep into the hole before he could see it. He had mocked her for hiding scraps of food like a rat, and he hadn't thought about it since. But what if it wasn't food? Dominic stumbled to his feet. The attic. He had to move carefully. The Lycan enforcers were stationed at every main exit and hallway intersection. He knew the service passages, though. The thin corridors behind the walls meant for the help, so they wouldn't be seen by the real people. The irony wasn't lost on him as he slipped into a narrow broom closet and pushed open a false panel in the back. The service halls smelled of dust and neglect. He climbed the narrow winding stairs to the attic level, his heart hammering against his ribs. If an enforcer caught him, they would shoot first and ask questions later. He reached Claraara's old room. It was freezing, little more than a closet under the eaves with a cot and a thin blanket. The sight of it gave him a pang of something that might have been guilt if he hadn't been so focused on self-preservation. He knelt where he remembered seeing her all those years ago. He pried at the dusty floorboards until his fingernails bled. Finally, one gave way. He reached into the darkness beneath the floor. His fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. He pulled it out. It was a small, rectangular iron-silver locket, heavily tarnished almost to black. It looked worthless. With trembling fingers, Dominic pried it open. Inside was a tiny, hand-painted miniature portrait. A man with striking violet eyes and a woman with chestnut hair were smiling, holding a baby wrapped in a white blanket. The resemblance to Claraara was undeniable, but it was what was hidden behind the portrait that made Dominic's breath catch. He used his claw to pop the miniature out of the frame. Folded tightly behind it was a scrap of parchment, yellowed with age. It contained a single sentence written in hurried, elegant script and a series of numbers that looked like coordinates. My darling star, trust no one but the violet moon. Dominic stared at it. The violet moon? It sounded like a fairy tale. But the coordinates? They pointed to a location deep in the neutral territories, a lawless expanse of land between the major packs. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew that Claraara had risked everything to hide this locket. It was her only connection to her past. It was leverage. A floorboard creaked behind him. Dominic spun around, shoving the locket into his pocket, his claws extending. Tiffany Rochute stood in the doorway. She looked terrible. Her expensive red dress was torn, her makeup smeared from crying, and there was a massive, purpling bruise on her chest where Claraara's kinetic blast had hit her. going somewhere, Alpha?" she sneered, her voice raspy. "Get out of my way, Tiffany. I don't have time for your tantrums." "My tantrums? You ruined my life. My father is furious. He's pulling the oil deal and he's disowned me for attacking a royal." She took a step closer, her eyes full of venom. "I'm stuck here in this prison you created." Dominic realized she was just as desperate as he was, and desperate people were useful. "Do you want revenge on her?" Dominic whispered. "Do you want to knock that crown off her head?" Tiffany hesitated. "How? She's a monster. You saw what she did to me without even touching me. I have something she wants. Something that proves she's not just a royal, but that she has secrets even Sebastian doesn't know about." He tapped his pocket. "I'm going to get her back. And when I do, I'll make sure you get a front row seat to her fall." Tiffany eyed him suspiciously. "You can't get off the estate. The enforcers will smell you a mile away." "That's why I need you," Dominic said, his mind working fast. "You smell like expensive perfume and despair right now. You're going to go down to the stables and set fire to the hayloft." "Are you crazy?" "It's a distraction. The enforcers will have to help put it out to save the horses. In the chaos, we cross the perimeter wall near the old creek bed. It's the weakest point in their scent net." Tiffany considered this. She hated Dominic right now, but she hated Claraara more. "And then what?" "Then," Dominic said, his eyes cold, "we go hunting for a queen." The neutral territories were a scar on the face of the earth. It was a strip of land that no Alpha claimed, a lawless, demilitarized zone where rogues, witches, and exiles went to disappear. The air smelled of sulfur and stagnant water, a stark contrast to the pine-scented purity of Blackwood. Dominic Sterling and Tiffany Rochute had been walking for 12 hours. Their designer clothes were ruined, caked in mud and torn by briars. Tiffany had stopped complaining 3 hours ago, her spirit broken by the oppressive silence of the swamp. "We are lost," Tiffany rasped, leaning against a rotting cypress tree. "That map is garbage, Dominic. You dragged us out here to die." Dominic didn't answer. He was staring at the locket in his hand. The coordinates etched into the silver casing were pulsing with a faint heat, guiding him like a compass. "We're not lost," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "We're close. Can't you feel the static?" Tiffany frowned. She could feel it. It felt like walking under high-voltage power lines. The hair on her arms was standing up. "What is this place?" "The coordinates led to Sector 4, Dominic said. "The Witchlands." They pushed through a final thicket of razor-sharp reeds and stumbled into a clearing. In the center stood a massive, weeping willow tree, its branches drooping into a pool of black water. Nestled within the twisted roots of the tree was a shack made of driftwood and animal bones. Wind chimes made of wolf teeth rattled in the breeze. "Friendly," Tiffany whispered, shivering. "Hello?" Dominic called out, his voice cracking. "I am looking for the violet moon." The door of the shack creaked open. A woman stepped out. She didn't look like a swamp witch. She looked like a librarian from the 1950s, prim, wearing a cardigan and cat-eye glasses, holding a cup of tea. But her eyes were solid black. No whites, no irises. "You are loud," the woman said. Her voice sounded like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "And you smell of failure and desperation. A potent cologne, Alpha Sterling." Dominic stiffened. "You know who I am?" "I am Althea," she said, taking a sip of tea. "I know everyone who crosses the barrier, but I am surprised to see you with that." She pointed a bony finger at the locket in Dominic's hand. "That belonged to Queen Genevieve. She gave it to me for safekeeping 20 years ago, but I gave it back to her the night she died." "It was hidden," Dominic said, stepping forward. "Claraara, the daughter, she had it. There's a note inside. It says to trust no one but the violet moon." Althea's expression darkened. She motioned for them to enter. "Come inside before the shadows hear you." The inside of the shack was larger than it looked, filled with jars of glowing liquids and ancient maps. Althea sat at a wooden table and gestured for the locket. Dominic handed it over reluctantly. Althea placed the locket on the table and waved her hand over it. The tarnished silver glowed. A holographic projection flickered into existence above it. A recorded message. It was Queen Genevieve. She looked terrified, clutching a baby Claraara to her chest. "If you are seeing this," the recording whispered, "then Alexander and I are dead. The coup has started. But it is not the Iron Wolves. We were wrong. It's him. It's Sebastian. My own brother-in-law." Dominic and Tiffany gasped in unison. "He covets the kinetic power," the Queen continued, looking over her shoulder. "He discovered a way to siphon it. He doesn't want to kill Claraara. He wants to farm her. He will hide her, break her spirit to keep her docile, and when she manifests, he will steal her essence to become the first kinetic male. Althea, hide the child. Don't let Sebastian find her." The recording cut out with the sound of a door being kicked in. Silence filled the shack. "Oh my God," Tiffany whispered, her hand over her mouth. "He's not saving her. He's fattening her up for slaughter." Althea looked at Dominic. "Sebastian Valerius is the most powerful illusionist in history. He staged the Iron Wolf attack to cover his tracks. He has been searching for Claraara for 18 years, not to restore her, but to harvest her. A kinetic alpha appears once every 1,000 years. If he drains her, he becomes a god, and she becomes a husk." Dominic felt the blood drain from his face. He thought back to the rejection. He remembered how Sebastian had arrived exactly when the bond broke. He waited, Dominic realized, horror dawning on him. He needed her broken. The rejection, the trauma, it forced the shift. He couldn't siphon her while her wolf was dormant. He needed me to reject her to wake her power up. "You were a pawn," Althea said coldly, "and now the endgame has begun. The coronation is scheduled for tomorrow night during the blood moon. That is when he will do it. He will bind her to the stone of ancestors and strip her soul from her body." Dominic clenched his fists. He hated Claraara for her power, for how she made him feel small. But the idea of her being consumed by that monster, the idea that he had handed her over to him. "How do we stop him?" Dominic asked. "You cannot fight him," Althea said. "He has the Lycan army, but—" She tapped the locket. "This recording is magically sealed with a truth hex. If you play this in the Great Hall of the Citadel, the magic will strip Sebastian of his illusions. The army will see him for what he is." "We have to get into the Citadel," Dominic said, grabbing the locket. "It's a fortress." "There is a way," Althea said, her black eyes glinting. "But it requires a sacrifice. The Citadel's defenses are keyed to reject anyone with malicious intent. To enter, you must surrender fully. You must walk in as prisoners." Dominic looked at Tiffany. She looked back, terrified, but nodding slowly. "We have a debt to pay," Dominic said. "Let's go." The Citadel was dressed in mourning black and royal gold. Thousands of Lycans from packs all over the world had gathered in the massive amphitheater carved into the mountain's heart. They were there to witness the return of the Queen. Claraara stood in the preparation chamber, staring at her reflection. She wore a gown of woven platinum that clung to her like a second skin. A heavy cape of white fur dragged behind her. She looked majestic. She felt like she was dying. Since arriving at the Citadel, the training sessions with Sebastian had been brutal. He forced her to expend massive amounts of kinetic energy, blasting targets until she passed out. He claimed it was to build her stamina. But every time she woke up, she felt lighter, hollower. "You look breathtaking, my dear," Sebastian said, entering the room. He wore the crimson robes of the regent. He looked like a benevolent father figure, his eyes warm and crinkling at the corners. "I feel sick, Uncle," Claraara said, leaning against the vanity. My wolf. She's quiet. Too quiet. Nerves, Sebastian soothed, placing a hand on her shoulder. His touch felt cold, like ice burning her skin. Tonight, under the blood moon, we will perform the binding ritual. It will stabilize your power. You won't feel this pain anymore. Why does the ritual require me to be chained? Claraara asked, her eyes narrowing. I read the scroll. It speaks of yielding the vessel. Sebastian's smile didn't waver. Old language, Claraara. It means yielding your fear. Trust me, haven't I saved you from the mud? Claraara looked at him. She wanted to trust him, but a small, nagging voice in the back of her head, the voice of the wolf she had suppressed for so long, was screaming, "Run!" A guard burst into the room, bowing hastily. Forgive the intrusion. We have captured intruders at the south gate. They claim to have vital information regarding the Queen's parents. Sebastian's eyes flashed with annoyance. Execute them! No! Claraara spun around. Bring them here. If they know about my parents, I want to hear it. Sebastian tightened his grip on her shoulder. Claraara, it is likely an assassin's trick. We are minutes away from the ceremony. I am the Queen, am I not? Claraara said, her voice echoing with the alpha tone. It was weak, but it was there. Bring them. Sebastian's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Very well. Bring them in. Moments later, the doors opened. 2 guards dragged in Dominic and Tiffany. They looked like wrecks, mud-stained, bleeding, and exhausted. Claraara stared at them. Dominic? Tiffany? Claraara! Dominic gasped, falling to his knees. The guards kicked him, but he stayed down. Claraara, you have to listen to me. Why shouldn't I kill you right now? Claraara asked, raising her hand. Violet energy crackled around her fingers. You made my life a hell. You rejected me. I know, Dominic said, looking her in the eyes. I am a coward. Kill me if you want, but don't let him kill you first. He pointed a shaking finger at Sebastian. Sebastian laughed. This is pathetic. The rejected boy trying to poison the Queen's mind against her savior. Guards, remove his tongue. He killed your parents, Claraara, Tiffany screamed. It wasn't the Iron Wolves. It was Sebastian! Claraara froze. The air in the room grew heavy. She looked at Sebastian. What did she say? Lies, Sebastian said, dismissing it with a wave. Desperate lies from jealous peasants. I have proof, Dominic yelled. He reached into his pocket. Stop him, Sebastian roared. The mask slipped. His face twisted into a snarl of pure malice. The guards lunged, but Dominic was faster. He pulled out the tarnished locket and slammed his thumb onto the catch. He didn't just open it. He threw it onto the marble floor between Claraara and Sebastian. The truth hex activated. A shockwave of white light blasted outward, knocking the guards back. The holographic projection of Queen Genevieve sprang to life, 10 feet tall, hovering in the middle of the room. Her voice, amplified by the magic, boomed off the stone walls. It's him! It's Sebastian! He wants to farm her! Claraara watched the projection, her heart stopping. She turned to Sebastian. The illusion was failing. Under the light of the truth hex, Sebastian's benevolent appearance melted away. His skin appeared gray and necrotic. A dark, parasitic aura swirled around him, tethered to Claraara's chest like a leech. You, Claraara whispered. You killed them. The act was over, Sebastian said, his voice changing. It was deeper now, distorted and demonic. They were weak. Your father wanted peace. He didn't understand that a kinetic alpha is a weapon to conquer. I am the regent. I am the power. I am your niece, Claraara said, tears streaming down her face. You are a battery, Sebastian sneered. And you are fully charged. He snapped his fingers. The floor beneath Claraara exploded with runes. Glowing red chains shot up from the stone, wrapping around her ankles, wrists, and throat. She screamed as they dragged her to her knees. "The ritual doesn't need the moon anymore," Sebastian announced. "I have enough power to force it." He turned to Dominic and Tiffany. "Kill the witnesses." The guards, mind-controlled by Sebastian's thrall, advanced. "Clara!" Dominic shouted, scrambling back. "Fight him! You're a true alpha. The chains are just magic. Magic can be broken by will." Claraara struggled, but the red chains were draining her. She felt her energy flowing out of her body, channeling into Sebastian. He threw his head back, inhaling her power, his necrotic skin knitting together, becoming youthful and glowing with violet light. "I can't," Claraara thought. "He's too strong." She looked at Dominic. He was fighting for his life, dodging a sword swing. He wasn't running. He had come back for her. He had walked into the lion's den with nothing but a locket and the truth. He rejected me, she thought, but he came back to save me. A spark ignited in her chest. It wasn't the bond that was gone. It was the fear. It was the fury of a queen who refused to be used. "I am not a battery," Claraara told her wolf. "I am the storm." "No," Claraara screamed. She didn't pull against the chains physically. She pulled at the energy Sebastian was stealing. She grabbed the flow of magic with her mind and reversed the polarity. Sebastian's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" "Taking it back." Claraara pulled. The violet light streaming into Sebastian stopped, then violently sucked back into Claraara. Sebastian stumbled, clutching his chest. Claraara's eyes went supernova. Violet. The chains turned white-hot, then shattered into dust. She stood up. The room began to shake. "You want my power, Uncle?" Claraara asked, her voice sounding like a legion of wolves. "Then take it." She thrust both hands forward. A beam of concentrated kinetic force slammed into Sebastian. The blast hit him, driving him backward through 3 stone walls, out into the massive amphitheater where thousands of guests were waiting. Claraara floated out after him, glowing like a vengeful god. Dominic and Tiffany ran out behind her. The entire lichen world watched as their regent tried to stand, coughing up black blood. "She is mad!" Sebastian shrieked. "Kill her!" But no one moved. They saw the truth hex. They felt the true alpha aura. It compelled them to bow, not to attack. Claraara landed softly. "I challenge you," she announced. "For the throne, for the murder of my parents, for the betrayal of the blood." Sebastian pulled a hidden dagger from his boot and lunged. Claraara didn't flinch. She caught his wrist in mid-air, her grip crushing the bone. Sebastian screamed. "The time for tricks is over," Claraara said. She placed her hand on his chest. She didn't blast him. She simply pushed, not his body, but his connection to his wolf. She severed it. Sebastian gasped, his eyes rolling back. He slumped to the ground, panting, human and powerless. "Take him to the dungeons," Claraara ordered the enforcers. "He will stand trial for treason." The enforcers rushed forward and dragged the screaming former regent away. Silence descended on the amphitheater. Claraara turned to the crowd. She was exhausted. She stumbled. Before she could hit the ground, strong arms caught her. It was Dominic. He held her up, supporting her weight. Claraara looked at the crowd. Slowly, one by one, the alphas in the audience stood up. They dropped to one knee. Thousands of wolves bowed in unison. "Long live Queen Claraara!" someone shouted. "Long live the Queen!" the chant began, shaking the mountains. Claraara Halloway, the kitchen maid of Blackwood, had taken her throne. The weeks that followed reshaped the world. Sebastian was sentenced to life in the Silver Prison. The Blackwood Pack was restored, though under heavy sanctions and new management. Dominic did not get the girl. That wasn't how this story ended. When the dust settled, Claraara called him to the throne room. She thanked him for saving her life. She granted his pack clemency. But when Dominic asked if they could try again, Claraara smiled sadly. "You broke the glass, Dominic. We can glue it back together, but the cracks will always show. I forgive you, but I do not belong to you anymore. I belong to the pack." Dominic accepted it. He returned to Blackwood, a humbled man determined to be the Alpha Claraara had deserved, even if he could never have her. Claraara ruled alone, the kinetic queen who rebuilt the Lycan world with justice rather than fear. And every year on the anniversary of the Mating Moon Gala, she would stand on the balcony of the citadel, watching the moon rise, knowing that her greatest strength hadn't come from a mate, but from the moment she learned to stand up for herself. If you enjoyed this dramatic story of betrayal, magic, and redemption, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel reach more fans of shifter romance. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a part of our next epic saga. Share this video with a friend who loves a good werewolf romance twist. What would you have done if you were in Claraara's shoes? Let us know in the comments below.